You're listening to Expertly Said, a podcast on the art and impact of communication. I'm Kristen Sweeney, founder and CEO of Every Little Word. My guest today is Keith Berman, Director of Internal Communications at Vertafore. Keith's career is centered around audience engagement. He started out as an FM rock radio DJ and spent a few years on the PR agency side in Boston before moving to Los Angeles and becoming a journalist. Upon moving to Denver, Keith moved into corporate communications with a focus on internal comms and employee engagement. He's worked at companies of all sizes and maturity, from a 20-person startup to Fortune 10 with 250,000 employees. And he has experience in B2C, B2B, high-tech, entertainment, healthcare, medtech, and SaaS. When not working, Keith spends his time chauffeuring his 2 children and walking his 2 dogs. He was recently named most likely to feature his dog in a Zoom by the mixing board powered by Axios staff. Occasionally, his alter ego, DJ Cosmic K, entertains the neighborhood. Keith, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kristen. And I do have to admit, I have one dog currently curled up in my lap, and the other one is on the floor right next to me, kind of making sighing noises. So they may make an appearance.
We're going to get to see why you earned this award at some point in the recording. Wonderful.
Proof is in the pudding here, so yeah.
Right. So we heard a little bit about the contours of your career journey, but I'd love to get into the how and the why. Of course, starting with your first career as DJ Cosmic K. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, that was actually not my on-air name.
Okay.
So it's funny, I made a LinkedIn post this morning about kind of going after what you want, and as the line goes from the Apple TV show Platonic, don't ask, don't get. So when I was in high school, I saw a pickup truck across the street from the high school parked in a lot, and it had radio station logos all over it from this station that I'd never heard of. And I was a radio nerd at the time, or still am pretty much, but I was like, this station doesn't exist. What's going on? So I walked into the business. I was like, whose truck is that? And some woman said, oh, it's my husband's. They're starting this new station in town. I was like, can I talk to your husband? I want a job. And so that's how I got started. It was actually because I grew up in a small town. It was a satellite-driven station. Like, we got feed from the satellite, and it was not local until one evening lightning hit the building and our surge protectors failed, and we lost $50,000 of satellite relay equipment inside of 2 seconds. I was actually one of, I think, 2 or 3 people who knew how to work the equipment in the building, and I was also, because at the time you needed it, FCC licensed to be on the air. So guess what? I got on the air, and I was running, like, when I wasn't doing my own show, I was running other people's shows. So that was a pretty long stretch of not getting any sleep whatsoever because I was doing so much.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Worked at a station while I was in college, not a college station, but an actual radio station in Boston. Shout out to the late, great WFNX. I miss you. After college, of course, my parents were like, you've got to get a real job. This isn't tenable. You're not going to get a career being a DJ. Okay, fine. So I moved into PR for a few years at a couple different agencies in Boston, and I was good at it, but I wasn't thrilled by it. So when the opportunity came up, I moved to Los Angeles and got back into the radio and music industry as a journalist, working for a trade magazine for the industry. And it was everything I wanted it to be and more. Like, I still have a story of standing on the balcony of a suite at the Chateau Marmont talking with one of my coworkers while Duran Duran was behind me mingling with the crowd and making a comment about, oh my God, I'm living almost famous. Like, this is truly
like,
what
that's
it's
peak.
like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's peak.
Yeah.
I met my wife in Los Angeles. We had one kid, and then realized, this is not exactly a stable environment to raise children. We were, in a 2-bedroom, 1,000-square-foot apartment in West Hollywood, and my wife wanted a second child, and the dog wanted a backyard, and
You're describing my life in Boston until 2 years ago right now.
So we moved to Denver. I mean, cost of living is way lower, or was at the time way lower here, and we got a good house, and I fell into corporate communications. It was a good way to transfer my skills from journalism and audience engagement into, an adult job, so to speak. And I found that I really enjoy it. internal comms especially, although communications in general is something that I've really come to enjoy because it gives me the chance to tell stories in engaging ways. And the higher up I get on the career ladder, the more strategy I find myself doing, and the more I find myself able to influence how things are said, not just what is said, and coming up with great ideas to be able to reach audiences. And honestly, I'm sure in every single interview that anyone in the comms world has been on, they've been asked the question, like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? And for me, it's seeing the impact of my work. It is when a leader delivers a line that I've written for them in talking points and seeing the reaction ripple through the crowd, or sending an email on behalf of an executive and getting responses back to the, you know, executive's inbox that they'll forward to me and say, people are actually hitting reply on my emails to say they appreciated the message. That's never happened before. Well, that's the magic of comms when it really works well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I've been through a few different industries, a few different companies over the years, but comms is kind of where I'm at now, and I hopefully will have a long and storied career in it, and it will hopefully at some point pay me enough that I can retire.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. I love what you said about the impact of your work. So, in our organization, our mission is to share great ideas with the world. And it is something I come back to on days that inevitably things feel like a total slog, or nothing's going right, or things aren't challenging. But being able to look and say, the work that we are doing at the end of the day is still accomplishing that.
Yeah,
And similar, when you get a response, I find for us, a lot of times we're working with a thought leader, with an executive or a subject matter expert. They know even before they get the external validation that something has hit, that something,
hmm
our idea, you've captured my ideas in a way I didn't know I could share in this way. It's, you know, it sounds like me, only better. It's like something people have said, right? But it's interesting because when something is really resonant, and I don't know if you find this too, the external validation is amazing, but there's a confidence even before that, that things are really well aligned with
for
that
sure.
individual. Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
I remember I had to write um, a pretty emotional email from the CEO.
Hmm.
It was actually in the wake of the George Floyd incident. And my boss at the time was the CHRO of the company I was working for. She had no edits, which of course is like every comms person's dream, like no
Yeah.
edits, just pass it along. She passed to the CEO, and the CEO's response was, "This sounds exactly like me. I couldn't have written it better myself. Send it as is." And I was like,
Yeah.
that is just the gold award right there. Like, and
Hmm.
again, how many years later, and I'm still talking about it, for me to keep that
Yeah.
as a career highlight, that was just one exchange, and I still derive so much career satisfaction from it.
Yeah. And it's more than the checkbox of, oh, it got through without any edits, right? There is a little bit of that, I think, but
Oh
it's
yeah,
also that it resonated, and like just that alignment piece of being, so connected and linked up. So I'm curious, as a fellow performer, so I have a background in musical theater, so I did not get a practical job coming right out of school. It took me about 10 years to get there. Um, but I'm curious how I have been asked this, how you think about maybe your performer background. And I would put what the work you've done, I would, kind of qualify that in the performance vein as having an impact on the way you approach communications.
a couple ways. So I sang a cappella for many years, both in college and after college. And then I also did some musical theater over the years.
I knew I
And
liked you. Yeah. Hmm.
um, I mean, that's the only reason why you like me? Come on, Kristen. Um, so I think it impacted my work in a couple different ways. One is obviously I can have a bit of an outgoing personality. I'm pretty easy to express myself, and I'm fine with getting up in front of crowds and doing things. I think that's led itself to raising my profile within companies because I'm always a good pick for someone to say, we need somebody who can present this. Keith, can you do it? And people will know I'll be able to sell it. Um, if there's an opening for a presenter or something of that nature, I'll raise my hand. Like at my company, we just did a marketing webinar for one of our products that was relaunching, and the person who typically does our external facing podcast had just left the company, and marketing was looking around and going like, who are we going to get to do this? It's like, well, I can if you need me to.
Yeah.
And they took me up on the offer, and then later I got a note from one of our marketing directors saying that was the highest engaged webinar that we've ever had. So apparently I did something right.
Nice.
Um, there was a lot of comments that were coming in, especially about, the flavor of the delivery and how at ease everyone seemed in the presentation. And it also kind of lends itself well to how I show up in terms of my executive presence. Um, it's as a performer, I think it's easier for us to be able to have a conscious decision over how we present externally and what kind of executive presence we put out there, what kind of work persona, as my wife says, that we put out there, and how we are able to sometimes put a good smile on our faces, especially in communications when we get told to do something we might not agree with. We have the acumen to be able to push it down a little bit and just kind of be like, okay, yep, we're going to do that and
Hmm.
perform the role as we need
Yeah.
to. Plus, for me personally, it's easy for me to show up and incorporate a little bit of humor into my presentation, especially around other coworkers and leaders, because then I find that's an easy way for me to earn trust pretty quickly.
Hmm.
And I feel like trust is a very underrated and very undervalued currency in business. It's really hard to earn and really easy to spend. So being able to earn trust quickly has helped me out in a lot of situations, especially when I'm walking into a new role. So I
Yeah.
feel like the performance part of that helps a lot.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's interesting what you said about the ability to sort of choose who you want to be and have a little bit more control over that. I hadn't really thought about that before, but I could see it. Yeah. I mean, certainly once I put these headphones on and get the mic in front of me, I have a little bit of a podcast host persona. So I don't do the full on like low voice into the mic thing, but
Welcome to
yeah,
NPR. Today, we'll be talking about quilting.
exactly. Um, yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. I'm curious, and you talked about transferable skills a bit. You've worked across a lot of different sectors. You've worked in organizations of many sizes, and I'm kind of interested to open up and hear what you think. I think most people in communications feel that their skills are very transferable. And at the same time, I think we're seeing in the market to some extent a more and more focus on niche and specialization. And have you done this role before? Well, you did this kind of comms, but not that kind. You did that size company, Series B, but not Series A. Um, oh, you were in pharma, but it was this kind of, it was oncology and it wasn't neurology. Like, so I'm curious how you think about maybe opportunities you had to jump across and try new things and what you kind of see if you think that landscape has changed at all today.
Yeah, that's an excellent question and a pretty timely one too. I have had the fortune of being able to convince hiring managers that comm skills are very transferable, and also the fact that when you come in from a different industry, it brings a different perspective because more of the same is not going to distinguish you from the pack. You and I were talking earlier about drug commercials and pharma commercials, and they all look exactly the same. And I couldn't tell you which drug they're hawking on TV, whether it's for, blood thinners or GLP-1s or kidney whatever, or, headache medicine. It's all like people frolicking in fields because the drug makes them live normal lives and we can go canoeing and backpacking and play with our children and things like that. So I think that having the outside perspective of being able to come into a new industry and bring fresh ideas is a benefit for a lot of companies because it can help you stand out from the pack a little bit. Comm skills are absolutely transferable, and that's something that I've banked on my entire career. Like you said in the intro, it's audience engagement. It's about getting people to listen to you, and it's about galvanizing emotions and being able to turn that into action. So at the end of the day, that's something that's applicable across any industry, any size company, whether it's internal or external or whatever kind of communications. You are looking for some kind of content to generate some kind of emotional response that generates some kind of activity in your audience. Where I think the current job market stands, and shout out to Andrew Blocky, who I was recently on a call with a group, and I asked about this actually, and he said because the market is very saturated right now with comms people, employers have the ability to pick and choose who they can bring on. And in a lot of cases, they will feel like someone having that niche experience can get them up to speed a lot faster. So if you are a B Corp and you're looking, or, Series C or whatever, or you're in pharma, or you're in, pick your poison, whatever field you're in, you can probably get that person up to speed more quickly on the regulations and the specific things that you have to stay within bounds on or can't say as a result of the regulations of the field, things like that, or, the way things are done based on the stage of the company and the life cycle. But I feel like what you're missing is that outside perspective. It's just the ability to come in and run the playbook again. Okay, well, you're running the same playbook that you ran at another company. So you're basically replicating what you did at a previous company. You're not getting that outside perspective of coming from oncology and going into financial services or something like that, where it's like, okay, well, this is slightly different. We can take this and we can tweak it. We can take the main messaging and turn it on its head a little bit. Or have you thought about doing things this way? Because that's never been done in this industry before, but I know that it works from another industry. So I think having the ability to convince somebody, especially a hiring manager, you have the proven skills, you have the proven toolkit to be able to do something. It's just about learning the specific application of it within that field. So that can be helpful because you can say, like, I've used a power drill before. I know how to use a power drill. I can apply my power drill to your, sheet metal versus doing it for house framing or something like that. It's just slightly different application of the same tools.
Yeah, there a couple of things from that, which I agree. I mean, one is that I think you're going to come in and you're going to the the broad kind of generic knowledge isn't going to be good enough anyway, right? So think about something like internal comms. You're going to come into a new organization. You're going to want to do a lot more than say, oh, all right, this is a pharma company. Kind of know who the people are here. I know what they want. I know you're going to make assumptions about the culture. You're not going to do that anyway, right? You're going to want to understand, what is the culture like here? What is the leadership like here? What is the unique kind of makeup of the team here? Who needs more engagement? Who doesn't? So you're going to have to do a critical mass of deep dive, extremely specific audience research anyway.
Totes my goats, and I think that if you don't do it, it's going to work against you.
Yeah.
Story from several years ago, so obviously, it's not anything current, but I had interviewed for a job and I was the runner-up and didn't get it, and then a few months later, they called me back and said, hey, it didn't work out with our first candidate. Do you want to re-interview for the position? We're reopening it. And I said, yeah, but I wanted to know what was going on and how come they had gone through that other person so quickly. And they said, well, the other person came in and tried to run a playbook and basically was like, this is how I'm going to do it. It worked at a past company, so I know it's going to work. And just tried to bully their way into rerunning something that had worked previously without, like you said, going through the situation of learning the culture, learning how things are done there, learning how to apply their specific skills to that specific situation, and it backfired on them. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think about years ago, it was pre-COVID, so maybe 2019. I joined as a fractional leader at a management consulting firm, and I was everything from like chief of staff to head of marketing over there. But one of the things I ended up doing was I had a lot of experience in like online businesses, and was something very interesting, especially back then, pre-COVID, where these tiny operations making less than 100K, folks who are still doing it as a side gig, had the tightest digital presences you could imagine, right? Like beautiful websites, amazing digital funnels, all the offers mapped out, social media for days. And then you're working with these service companies, and this was an example, and they're like super old school, and they didn't have the technology, they didn't have the digital presence. And so I was able to really bring a lot of that over. And what I saw was that, again, pre-COVID, especially as we were moving into COVID, is the perception of that company went far beyond the reality of the organization, right? They were like, you must have a huge staff, you have so much going on, you must be growing like crazy. And they were growing, of course, partly because of certainly the work we were putting in, but the reputation and image that was established, it wouldn't have happened that way had I not, said like, look, I'm seeing people who are doing 50K a year, and they look like $1 million online. Like, we got to be able to bring some of that over here to this organization trying to sell, high ticket coaching and consulting services. So I do think that outside perspective can be really valuable, certainly married with, obviously, as you said, there is some benefit in some, I think, more regulated sectors, some of that industry expertise. And if you're going to bring somebody on like that, I think there's also a personal responsibility to get yourself up to speed. You don't want to be, just like I say, when we get in front of an executive, we don't want to be asking them the 101 level questions. We want to have the basics down on a particular topic and then be able to go deep with them. You don't want to be wandering around the workplace, like asking about the basic acronyms, right? So I do think if you're someone who's making that transition, a level of kind of accountability to get up to speed. But I imagine most people feel that way because they don't want to walk around being clueless in their first few weeks.
And you said something about learning the acronyms. It's really funny because one of the things that I found in transferring even companies, but especially transferring industries, you have the same acronyms. They just mean different things.
Yes, you do.
And so you have to spend the time like unlearning that acronym and relearning what it means in a different way. I'm like, oh my God, I can't even believe that I have to redefine what TLA means or something like that. So it's ridiculous. So, and I'm sure you probably heard the dogs, they were going berserk because someone dared walk by the house.
Oh, how dare they? Well, they're just protecting you, keeping you safe.
They are. Well, Milo wants to come back up, so of course he's making his appearance on the Zoom.
Hi, Milo. So tell me a little bit about what's challenging in internal comms right now, and what do you think is exciting? What opportunities do you see?
So I would say what's challenging in internal comms, and it's probably not something that is just for internal comms, but it's for a lot of people in communications, is AI. It's about learning how to use it in ways that accelerate your skill sets and can accelerate your work without giving the impression that AI could replace you, because it can't. I think AI is a great tool. And again, going back to the reference that I made earlier, I liken AI to a power drill. It's not going to pick itself up off the ground and drill into the wall and build the house for you. There needs to be a human there that guides it and says, okay, we have to put the screw in this angle at this amount of torque with this amount of pressure. So in that respect, AI is decent as far as accelerating your capabilities, and there's definitely things that I've used it for to go outside of my own wheelhouse in terms of, like, I can read basic HTML. I can't code it. So for our email platform, I wanted to update our templates. And I knew our templates looked like they had been built in 1972, so I asked ChatGPT, hey, can you code this template for me? And it took a lot of back and forth. I'd say all told, probably my team and I spent about 14 to 16 work hours getting it to where we needed it to be. But in the end, it was a great upgrade for the look and feel of our weekly newsletter. It saved us probably thousands of dollars and weeks of back and forth with an external designer. So it was able to give us capabilities that we hadn't used before. Um, it can also be a good pressure test for making sure that your tone or your unconscious biases are factored in appropriately. Um, I had an issue where I was putting together a survey for something our IT department wanted to do, and I personally was against it. But, the communicators need to put out stuff that even is distasteful for them. So I put together the survey, and then I ran it through chat, and I said, hey, can you check this for unconscious bias and make sure that I'm not using any emotionally charged words or tone in this? And it called it out in a couple of areas. Like, you did a pretty good job, but there are still some tweaks that I would make to make sure it's completely neutral and that your background and your feelings are not factored in here at all. I was like, great, thanks. Where I feel that AI is a threat is also, I think, a threat to most communications people, because there is that feeling of anyone can do communications. I can put fingers to keyboard. I can write an email. Why do I need a communicator to do that? Well, I mean, I can put gas in my car. It doesn't make me a mechanic. There's an art and science to communications, to getting that emotional impact to land, to saying things a certain way that is valuable to your audience and impactful without just saying, I'm just going to sit here and write because I can.
Yeah.
So AI has not learned how to generate that emotional reaction yet. And I'm caveating it by saying, even though caveating is not a word, I'm putting in the caveat that it can't do it yet, because who knows when it might be able to. But basically, it is digesting all of the content that humans have put out there, averaging it out and saying, I'm going to predict what's going to happen next based on everything I've taken in. So it is a predictive model, and basically saying, out of everything that's ever been written that I've consumed, here is what I think will happen next. Which is why it's good to be able to pressure test tone, because it knows what a neutral tone is. It aims for the middle. It averages out. But it doesn't give you that emotional punch. It's not going to give you talking points that a leader can stand up in front of a crowd and you can see that ripple effect of the reaction through the crowd, that kind of thing. It's not going to generate an email that people will be like, oh my God, I love this message. I feel the need to actually respond back to this leader and say how much I love this message. It's not going to do that for you. So I encourage comms people, especially internal comms people, to become AI literate, to figure out ways to use it that go outside of the skill set that they have as communicators, but also convince people it's not going to replace writers. It is not going to bring the same skill level that communicators do. And I fear that the bottom rungs of the comms career ladder will be taken away, because they'll be like, oh, AI can just draft a first draft, it's fine. Well, if you don't get the experience at that specialist or coordinator level of writing something and seeing why your manager and why a leader redlined the hell out of it, and why they change things a certain way, and get that explanation and learn from it, you can't come into a communications job at a manager level and expect just to magically be proficient at this stuff. You need to learn it. You need to spend the time doing that work and learning the fundamentals of communications before you can get to the point of being able to send a draft off that gets passed through without any edits or minor edits. you have to be able to figure out what's going to resonate with an audience before you put together talking points for a CEO that are just going to hit right when they stand up in front of a crowd.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting what you said about the pumping gas and the mechanic. I think about it as like running, like everyone can run,
Hmm.
but that doesn't mean everyone is a professional athlete.
Hmm.
And I think that's very clear to us all in the general population. I think it is not as clear always in something like comms, right? Because again, there's a certain set of skills that people have who can write, read, think, sure. But that's not that there is a difference between having the basic ability to like go for a jog around the block and be competitive in that
Yeah,
space or professionalized.
for sure.
You were talking about so you're talking about the I wholeheartedly agree on AI. Love that you're looking at it as a way to expand capabilities. I think one of the things I find most honestly stressful about it is that need to honestly the need to constantly be testing and trying to figure out and seeing how we can use it. That is a whole other layer of sort of pressure and
Stress.
stress that for better or for worse, a lot of us didn't have for a long time, right? Certainly there are folks who are very, very innovative and maybe that's their whole life and they love that kind of work and really thrive in that environment. But I think that that overlay has kind of been thrust on everyone writ large to say, okay, you need to constantly be figuring out where AI works for you, where it doesn't, what more can you do with it? And it's tiring. It takes a lot of bandwidth. So that's something I'm kind of noticing is it's not only what are the use cases for these tools, but the part of I need to constantly be figuring out and keeping up. I think we're all doing that at a pace that many of us, myself included, are not really accustomed to.
Yeah, and I think that's where the skills expansion set comes in. And I can think to myself, like, excuse me, I can do something. Will I hit a point in this process where I'm going to need help from somebody else because I can't do it? Or I'm evaluating whether or not a project actually could come to fruition. And I'm like, well, I don't have the resources to do XYZ. Okay, can AI do that? And again, with the email template, that's something that I wanted to do. I wanted to freshen up our templates. I can't do it. My team can't do it. Okay, can AI do it? Yes, it actually can.
Yeah.
So, and it's also good for me in terms of being able to quickly pressure test some things and give me a different perspective. And I can use it as a gut check. And obviously, I've got to take it with the appropriate mounds of salt because it is a machine and it can't think the same way that I do. But it can do some things that certainly point me in different directions sometimes if I get stuck.
Mhm.
And it can certainly do things a lot more quickly than I thought it could. Like, even the basic stuff, I got a request to send out to a specific distribution within my company, and all I had were names. Okay, well, I've got 300 to 500 names, and I need to
Mm.
send specifically to them, and I have to upload it into our email platform. Okay, well, I also have an Excel spreadsheet with everybody in the company, their name, and their email address. I give it to chat. I say, here are the names. And I have to do it in a specific way. Like I describe AI as a very tech forward fifth grader. Um, so
I love
I
that.
have to be very specific in terms of, giving it the right prompts and telling it, okay, take this, do this, do this, do this, do not do that. But basically, I took these two spreadsheets, I loaded them into chat. I said, take the names, cross-reference against the other one, give me a final spreadsheet that has the names from spreadsheet A with the emails matched up from spreadsheet B. It did it inside of 30 seconds. Something that
Amazing.
manually would have taken me 3 to 4 hours to go
Yeah.
through all these different Excel spreadsheets and copy, paste, copy, paste, copy, paste till my fingers broke. It helped accelerate the process, and it was a hurdle that I faced that it was just kind of a light bulb moment of, oh, hey, AI can take care of that for me. This is something I
Yeah.
can use to go outside of my own personal skill sets. I need it done. I can't do it, or I could, but it would take a
Right.
whole lot of time that would not be worth my while to do. AI can do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I recently was able to use AI to be a little bit more analog. So I have gotten back to a little bit of journaling in the morning recently. And I was doing kind of a brainstorm for an article I wanted to write. And I was like, okay, I want to do this off the screen. I'm not drafting, I'm brainstorming. And I hopped on ChatGPT and was like, can you read cursive? And it was like, yeah, sure I can. So I was like, all right, I'm going to try and write kind of neatly. And sure enough, I was able to upload 3 images and then get the text and then start to work with it from there, which was awesome because it let me be kind of in my happy place with a notebook and pen in the beginning of the process, but not have to retype the whole thing in order to get it into a format where I could start, really building it out. So that was
Yeah,
awesome.
completely. Although I will say for me, I type faster than I write. And when I try and take notes, I'm very messy with my cursive. So having an iPad where I can just quickly take notes with a magic
Yeah.
keyboard, I'm
Yeah.
all over that.
Same. My penmanship definitely needs some work. It's a little rusty. You mentioned a minute ago the kind of lower rungs of the career ladder. So I want to shift into our one big idea now, because I know you've got um, something you really want to talk about in terms of career pathway for communicators, internal comms, possibly external comms too. So tell us a little bit more about the journey from comms to CEO and why it's important to you.
Um, well, my inner megalomaniac certainly wants to rule the world. I frequently will joke that I'm going to secede and form the independent nation of Keithistan, which is very conveniently abbreviated to INC. My 3 main operating principles are: we use the metric system, because
Mm,
why aren't we using the metric system?
sure.
We stay on standard time year round because I'm sick of changing the clocks back and forth, and it's absolutely ridiculous. And our governing body will do simple majority, up down majority rules. We're not going to do with super majorities and filibusters and all that. It's just
All right. You
straight
guys would do
majority.
like heads up, 7 up style or
Yes, something
anonymous
like
voting?
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, raise your hand. Um, so yeah. Anyway, going back to how this actually applies to communications. Look, I've done both sides of the equation. I've done external comms, I've done internal comms. I've been lucky enough that I've been able to find my groove and find what I really love with internal comms, but I find a lot of what we do in internal comms does apply externally. What I've seen from the career path, unfortunately, is that it's harder to get from internal comms to a chief comms officer role than it is to get from an external comms role and PR role into a CCO position. And I don't think that's right. I think that there's a perception that internal comms is internal marketing, and it's really not. But I feel like the same principles that are used in internal comms can very easily be used externally. We see all these job postings these days about companies that need a chief storyteller. That's what internal comms people do. We tell
Yeah.
stories. We tell them in a slightly different way because we're trying to galvanize a slightly different action from someone within a company versus outside of the company. We're either trying to build employer brand within the company, or we're trying to have someone buy our stock externally, or, vote a certain way in a proxy vote or something like that externally, or just build the brand differently and build public perception differently, because you're not talking about the great benefits of the great culture within the company. You're talking about customer experience, but it's still storytelling. It's still the same fundamentals, and it's not the same to go from outside to in as it is to go from inside to out. It's a lot easier to go from internal to external because, again, that toolkit, that skill set is the same. You are trying to drive an emotional response that galvanizes action. It's just tweaking a little bit to galvanize a different action and perhaps galvanize a slightly different emotional response. So in that way, I feel like it's a lot easier for internal comms folks to take that CCO role because we know how people are going to respond. Full disclosure, I have a degree in psychology. I never did anything with it in
Hmm.
terms of, being a psychologist, but I feel like it helps me understand the human response a little bit better, because then I can fashion my communications in ways that do galvanize that emotional response. I know how to get to people. I know how to make them feel something as a result of a communications campaign or message that I put together. And again, if I have that end goal in mind of, and this is the question that any good communicator worth their salt should be asking at the start of any campaign composition, is what action do you want? What outcome do you want from this? And that will help shape how you put together the campaign or the message. It's just shaping the message slightly differently. And I feel like it's a bit of a different angle to come from external to internal, because it's more marketing tools. It's more metric based, especially from a marketing team where you have things that you can measure in, like CPMs or MQLs or whatever. We don't have that as much within internal comms. We have to fly a little bit more by gut and a little bit more by emotional response. And yes, there are metrics that we have that we can use to judge things like open rates, or, time spent on intranet, or things like that, or even overall employee engagement surveys. You could apply those things externally, like customer NPS and things like that, or stock price, or, share of voice within market. I feel it's very similar, and I feel like it's a much easier translation to get from internal to external than external to internal, because you lose a lot of that, almost the measuring sticks that you use to gauge the response and the effectiveness of your campaign when you go from external to internal. And I feel when you go from internal to external, you gain a lot of metrics, and it makes you even sharper of a communicator to be able to do that. So I think that the CCO should come from internal comms, and getting the external experience is going to be more helpful in terms of expanding their own skill set versus helping the company. I think it's going to help the company externally to have an internal comms leader move into that CCO role. From there, and you can tell I'm very passionate about this because I'm very animated. I'm waving my hands around. From there, I think it's a good path to go from CCO to CEO. And I don't see it happening at all. I see there's a lot of path from CMO to CCO or to CEO. I feel like there's a lot of pathway from CFO to CEO, but the CCO does not get the love, and I feel like that needs to change. There's two things that I think really contribute to this. One is the role of a strategic communicator as advisor. Any communications leader who has that strategy in their toolkit knows that they are asked for opinions, that they are drawing together things that go outside the wheelhouse of communications. You're frequently asked about things, or you're asked to advise on things, or you're raising your hand and saying, we might not be able to do that based on the capabilities of what's happening over here. We know things based on how connected we are across an entire enterprise, or we should be if we are good communicators, that help form those decisions and help us think outside of communications to business impact. So we become strategic advisors. And a couple of years ago, Edelman came out with a survey finding that said 20% of a CCO's time is spent advising the CEO and the C-suite on things that are not comms related. If you work a 5-day week, which I hope most people do, knowing in communications we frequently don't, but if you do work a 5-day week, that's an entire workday you're spending on non-comms related strategy. That's business decisions you're making. And as a CEO, your job is to make business decisions and then to communicate out why those business decisions are valid and why things should go the way that they're going. You need to be the spokesperson for these decisions that you've made, which is a communications ability. I feel like the one place where we don't have the skill set that's acknowledged is probably in finance and kind of those hard skills. And I know there's people who feel like hard skills, the definition of that is not great. But I will say that finance is something either you know or you don't. It is more science than art, whereas communications is a pretty even, if not slightly more balance of art and science. So if you do get an MBA, if you do spend some time with your finance leaders, and truth be told, I ran into our CFO at a recent meeting, and I was like, hey, I'd like to learn more about the actual numbers of the business and figure out like how finance works. Spending time learning that stuff and getting that as part of your toolkit can help arm you to make better business decisions, which again positions you as a better strategic advisor. So when you are spending that one workday a week managing and giving advice to the CEO and the C-suite, you have a little bit of that finance knowledge. You know enough to be dangerous on those kinds of things. And that can also position you well to make better financial decisions as a CEO. I feel like the pathway from CCO to CEO should definitely be there. I feel like we need to do a better job of publicizing our value to the business, not just because we're good with spreadsheets, we should be in the CEO position, but because we have a great understanding of how a business works, because businesses are made up of people. I know that's shocking. My God, who knew? But businesses are made up of people. People make decisions based a lot of time on social and emotional responses. And quite honestly, stock prices change based on social and emotional responses. Look at our current political climate. The stock market is swinging because of something someone said in the media, and that's causing an emotional response because people are trying to use their emotions to gauge the market. That is where communication skills come in, and you can help guide a stock price externally by sending the right message.
Yeah.
I will get off my soapbox now because I could probably spend the next half an hour going, oh my God, this should be happening. Why isn't this happening?
Gosh, so much good stuff in there. I think one of the things that's so refreshing for me to hear in this conversation is I really love when communicators claim the art part, right? Claim this isn't just what can be boiled down to metrics, and to say it's both and, right? Like you can measure things and you should learn from what you measure, and that can be important. But it's also important to understand and remember that measurement is usually a proxy for something more important that you're trying to actually feel and discern and create. And to talk about emotion, another thing I think about a lot is I think we like to pretend that when we're in business, when we're in our work setting, that we act logically only and we just make all the correct logical decisions, and that if we're hitting a roadblock, it's an operational obstacle, and it's never because someone feels vulnerable or uncomfortable or is avoiding conflict or has a feeling or is afraid. It's
Yes,
all of those things all of the time.
because when supply chain comes into the CEO's office and says, we can't do this, we can't get this product to market because, the suppliers don't have the supplies that we need and the shipping costs are way too high and it's going to eat into our profits, the CEO is not like, well, yes, I completely understand what you're saying and we'll just rework the schedules. The CEO is going to be like, oh, which is an emotional response. So totally. The art part, I think, is, again, from a business perspective, what gets us in a little bit of trouble because that makes communications seem like a cost center because we do not have the full range of metrics and we can't go into someone's office and say, look at how many CPMs we have and this campaign drove this many click-throughs. Because we're not directly tied to revenue, that makes us easy to be on the chopping block when it comes time for budget cuts. But I think it's the cycle of we get cut, employee engagement falls, brand falls, share of voice in the market falls, and then people are like, well, we need more of that. We got to hire a marketing department. We got to hire a communications department. We need to make sure that people in our industry are talking about us. Why aren't I getting on CNBC? Why aren't, the analysts talking about us? Okay, hire more people for AR and IR and PR. And then it comes back, and then it's just the same cycle that keeps happening over and over and over again. So I think if leaders, especially business leaders, know that you need that constant blend of art and science. And even if you're not seeing the direct response from, your metrics as far as share of voice in the market or employee engagement, if you take away the communications portion of that, something's going to happen. It's like,
Yeah.
again, with the car runs perfectly until something goes wrong. Like if you just say, oh, my oil light came on, but it doesn't matter, the car's still running. Later on, your car's going to overheat on the side of the road because you didn't tend to it. You have to keep things in upkeep at all times, even during the good times, even when, you're able to do 5 seconds off the line to get to 50 miles an hour at a red light, or from a red light to a green light because somebody's revving their engine at you. Great, your car performs then. The reason why your car performs then is because you do the maintenance, you do take it in for routine things and replace the oil as needed and keep it fresh, even when things are running just fine.
It's so true. And it just, there might be actually a psychology term for it, but it's right. Like nobody gets credit for the bad thing not happening.
I frequently say that one of my issues with communications, especially internal comms, is it's a very mushy discipline. I can't prove a negative. I can't prove something somebody did the job right because of a communication they read, or they feel a certain way about a company because of a campaign that I put out. That's the art portion of it. And I keep going back to this one line from Futurama where the character Bender meets God, and God says, when you do things right, people hardly notice it at all. Or something like that. It's like, if you do things right, people aren't really sure if you've done anything at all. I think that's the actual quote. But I use that quote often to describe the art of a communicator, because we can't prove that we made someone do something the right way. We can't prove that we made somebody feel the right way, that, they got an email from their CEO that really affirmed to them, boy, I'm really working in the right place. I'm going to stay here forever. Or, I can't prove that they didn't wire two things together that shouldn't be wired together and didn't cause that house fire because they read the communication
they
that
thought
said,
absolutely about the core
absolutely
values.
Do not do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting conundrum, and I don't know that we're going to solve it today, but I do definitely align with that idea that when you're doing, what'd you say, when you're doing things
when
right?
When you're doing things right, people aren't really sure that you've done anything at all.
Yeah, that's so interesting. I love what you said about the ability to really focus on storytelling. And maybe this is the upside, right, to some of this challenge we're talking about, of being able to lean in a little bit more to the emotional response. And it's not just the clicks, and it's not always just the action that's taken, because there is a little bit less measurement on the internal side. Can you share any examples of a storytelling campaign that you felt was really effective or fun? Or
Yeah, this was a few jobs ago. We were coming out with a new product that was going to change how our frontline workers did their work in a particular environment. It was going to completely change the workflow. And we needed to convince them that this was, even though this was a massive change, this was a better deal. And it would take a little bit of work on their part to do it. But in the end, it would be easier for them. It'd be better experience for them. It'd be a better experience for our customers. So I still remember getting the details on the product, being told by my boss and her boss, come back in a week, we're going to meet again. I want to hear your ideas on a campaign. Okay. Came back in a week, walked into the meeting, sat down, and said to the both of them, I want to do a Sarah McLachlan sad dog ASPCA style commercial and campaign. And so my boss reacted exactly like that. She burst into laughter because she was like, well, this is Keith doing his thing. Now he's going to come up with some weird stuff. I'm going to let him do it because he's proven it. Her boss frowned, and I kind of talked them through. Well, she was more of the mindset of, this is business, we're serious here.
Yeah.
But as I talked through the campaign and I talked through why I wanted to do that, they got it, and I got the go-ahead to do it. When we rolled out the video, and it basically was, the first part of the video was the technicians going into situations and being told, you can't do that, and this is, I'm not going to let you do that, and this is horrible, and really echoing a lot of the roadblocks that they faced in their normal workflow, and just overall the customer impact, and picturing all that, and then, sunshine and roses because we have this new thing and it's causing so much joy, and the technicians are doing their work and they're smiling and the customers are smiling and laughing and everyone's having a good time. And, the guy hosting the video is like, and we need your help to make this happen. The power is in your hands. You can do this. And we had a pilot market that we did this in. And I still remember I was so anxious waiting for the feedback, and I got the phone call from the site manager for our pilot market, and he's like, dude, our techs saw your video and stood up and cheered. That has never happened before.
Wow.
I was like, oh my God, I love this. And the uptake on the product in that market for our initial rollout was insanely high, and it worked for our national rollout. It was just so great to see, again, that ripple effect of just they were able to see themselves in the campaign. They knew it was lighthearted and, poking fun at them, but still really embodying the pain that they felt, and that they got the push of, we're trying to make your jobs easier. We're going to make a better experience for you. We're going to make a better experience for our customers, which means your interaction with them is going to be better. And it was through this framing that they kind of instinctually in the back of their heads probably knew, but could still see themselves in and experienced and loved, because it wasn't just the talking head saying, do this, talk to your customers about this, say these words this way. They lived it and they got it, and it was great.
Oh, I love that. I did not know the Lilith Fair was going to be part of our conversation today. What a delight.
I mean, who knows? I'm going to bring in Tori Amos in a couple seconds. She's, down the street shoveling, so she's decided to drop by for a quick say hi. Yeah.
I love what you said about, I mean, to me here, it's so interesting going back to our conversation around metrics, right? You could have gotten a 1 to 10 scale of response, and maybe you did capture that as well, but there's something so different, even in me hearing this second hand or third hand, maybe, about they stood up and cheered. And that just evokes a feeling in me. I mean, you're talking about engaging people. I imagine it's such like a virtuous cycle of coming back to you and helping you, I'm sure, feel really engaged in that moment in your role as well.
Completely. And to go back to the fact that businesses are people and we're not just logical creatures and all responding like, Spock and being like, yes, this is the way that it should be, and I understand. Like, if in the moment I'd handed everyone a survey and said, from 1 to 10, please rate your response on this, it would have taken away some of the emotional punch. They would have been like, okay, yeah, I'll rate that a 10 or whatever. Well, maybe I think about it, maybe I don't want to rate it a 10 because psychologically I don't like giving people
don't give
10s.
Yeah.
So, give it a 9 or whatever. But just the raw emotion of standing up and cheering and hearing that an entire room did that, and hearing the surprise in the site manager's voice when he said, like, I've never seen this before. This happened. Like, that in itself, that's the 10. That's what really drives for me, the fact that that was a win. That was not just metrically, we were able to measure this and we were able to put this down on paper and run it through Excel. And this is the average that it came out with. And this project was rated a 9.57. Again, businesses are people and people are emotional. Even looking at somebody like Jim Cramer, who I'm not a fan of, but he knows how to work the emotional angles. Like, he'll stand up there on his show and he'll pound on his sound effects and he'll rant and rave, and it galvanizes an emotional response from his viewers, which makes them either buy stock or dump a stock. So again, that's the emotional storytelling from the internal comms toolkit that translates into external/IR/AR stuff.
Yeah.
This is why I think internal comms people should be the CCO, and why they can also make it to CEO.
Because, obviously CEOs make many important business decisions, but a huge part of their role is setting the tone for culture and leading and inspiring the team. And so that's really what you're talking about here, like understanding the messaging and the storytelling that can do that. I love that.
Well, and one of the examples that I keep going back to about that is Costco. Costco famously does not have a communications team, but Their NPS is one of the highest in the country. It's about the customer experience, and that is directly related to the culture within the company, which is framed by the CEO on down. Their CEO rarely does media appearances, but whenever he does, he's measured and he tells a good story about what it's like to work for Costco. And he also, one of the things that's interesting about my job in internal comms is that frequently, more than one role, employer brand has fallen under my domain, which is kind of an external comms thing.
Yeah, for sure.
But how your employees talk about the company to their friends, to their relatives, to their neighbors, that also creates the halo effect around your brand. And Costco has that overall halo effect because of the culture within the company. And that is entirely driven from the CEO down.
Yeah, love that. All right. We're going to transition now to our lightning round segments. This is the last segment to help wind us up. It's called The Last Word.
Okay.
Every guest gets the same 5 questions. So just go with your gut on these. You ready?
Okay.
All right. Question 1. What's your favorite word to say out loud?
Recombobulate.
Wow. How often are you using it?
So not often, but the reason why I love it is in most airports I've seen after you get through the TSA checkpoint area and you've had to take off your belt and shoes if you're not pre-check or whatever, and you have to put everything back together, there is actually a sign that says recombobulation area. And every time I look at that, I'm like, that is such a great word. I absolutely love that.
That's perfect.
Because you got to put yourself back together after everything's come out.
Perfect description for how you feel, too.
Yes, exactly. So I love that word and I try and use it. I actually got to use it in a communication earlier this week, and I was like, that is a personal win. I'm going to take that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Number 2, what's a word you know from reading, but you're not quite sure how to say it out loud?
So this is actually not from reading, but when I first saw the movie Contact with Jodie Foster, John Hurt played one of the roles, and he's British, and he said the word primer, which I always thought, like school book, like this is, the basic thing, like a math book. So I started saying, oh, this is a primer. And then somebody said to me, oh, you mean primer? And I was like, is it primer?
Do I?
And so ever since then, because I've known it as primer from the movie, because he said it the British way, I'm like, is it primer or primer? And so since then, I've avoided using that word, except in the use of, I need to put a primer on it, like a coat of paint.
Yeah.
That I know is primer.
Avoidance is a great strategy for this problem.
Yeah. But like if someone's talking about like a school book or like I need to give you a basic lesson on that, I'm like, I need to give you a basic lesson because I don't know. And to this day, I mean, this movie's been out for 30 years now. I still don't know if it's primer or primer.
Yeah. Yes, it is.
Exactly. Yes.
Question 3.
And the British just have so many great ways of saying things like aluminium instead of aluminum.
I once had a British person tell me that American English is actually just really lazy British English. And they were like, you just don't say all your vowels. And I was like, this is kind of right.
Yeah.
It's pretty much accurate.
Yeah.
All right. What's one phrase or saying you wish could be retired for good?
It's not a phrase or saying, but it's something that people do. I wish people would stop using nouns as verbs. Like, what's the ask? It's not an ask. You ask someone something. You do not give them an ask. You make a request. You ask them. So it would be, what's the request, not what's the ask. Stop using verbs as nouns.
Like it. What's a communication practice or principle that's non-negotiable for you?
A lot of filler phrases, especially when people start messaging by saying things like, I wanted to write you today to say that. Or, especially like, I wanted to do this. Don't want to do something. Just do it. I'm asking you to do this. Or don't want to do something.
Concise,
just do it.
Clear. Yep.
Concise, clear. If I want to ask you to do that, am I going to actually do it? I don't know.
Yeah. What's the last thing you read, heard, or watched that stuck with you?
I'm going to have to give a little backstory on this one.
Okay, do it.
Okay. Seth MacFarlane of Family Guy and Cleveland Show and American Dad fame also did a show called The Orville, which was kind of his homage to Star Trek, asterisk, I'm a huge Star Trek nerd, so of course I watched The Orville. There was an episode that didn't get filmed. I think it was because of COVID and a couple other things that happened that they didn't film this episode, but he wrote it into a novella. Like he took the script and novelized it. And it was amazing. Basically, it starts out and like for the first half of the book, I wasn't even sure, like, did I like get the wrong book? Did Amazon like deliver the wrong book to me? Because it tells the story of like, it's 1910 in New York and, things are great and whatever. And then all of a sudden this mom runs in with her baby and is screaming, "Oh my God, help me, save my baby," and then runs out. And the people in the hotel are like, okay, so I guess we got to raise this kid now. And the kid gets raised and gets adopted by a family. Family was visiting New York from Germany. They go back to Germany and then, things happen, as we all are aware of what happened in Germany in the 20s and 30s and 40s. And so, of course, the kid becomes, unfortunately, a Nazi concentration camp commandant. Until a couple characters halfway through the book show up, and they're from the starship the Orville. And turns out the whole thing happened in what in Star Trek The Next Generation parlance would be a holodeck, basically a kind of like an imaginary thing where it turns into this environment where you can live out a story or live out a thing because it uses imagery to create a very realistic VR environment to be able to live in. And what happened was the 1910 New York hotel was the setup for these two researchers on this remote outpost, and to relax, they would go into this thing to experience a simpler time. And their outpost was invaded by the enemy, and they wanted to save their kid, so the kid was put into this holodeck thing. And the computer said, "We have to protect this child." Well, based on the progression of time in this thing, what is the safest way that this child could get raised and not be, impacted by world events? Oh, let's make him a Nazi concentration camp commandant because that puts him in power. And he is untouchable at that point. Until, of course, the parents are freed from the enemy. They come back 30, 40 years later. Their son has grown up into a full-grown Nazi adult. And now you have to bring him out of this and be like, sorry, everything you've experienced in your entire life is not real. All this hatred that you've developed and all these hate feelings that you feel, that happened hundreds of years ago, and we are a way more evolved society now, and you need to get rid of that and be a normal person and live in this environment where we have a pan-galactic unified government. Everyone is equal. Everyone is great. And don't be evil. Don't be a Nazi. And just the fallout of this, having his world crash down on him, and also having him come from a position of ruthless power and evil because that's what shaped him based on his environment, to, oh, that doesn't exist anymore. We've evolved past that, and you've got to be a better person starting, right now. It was just fascinating.
Wow.
And just the emotional impact of that was like, oh my God, I did not see this twist coming. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I read the book literally probably 2-3 years ago, and I still think about it. And I still talk to people. I'm like, if you've ever watched The Orville, you have to read this book. It is amazing. But even if you hadn't, it's still amazing. You have to read it. And the title of the book is Sympathy for the Devil. It really is. It's just such a great overarching description of this impossible situation of what do you do in this kind of thing? Like, how do you rehab somebody like that?
Yeah. Wow. Power of a good story.
Yeah. So way more explanation than you probably were expecting, but it's just that really has stuck with me for so long.
2-3 years as being like something that's still really resonant. That's really powerful.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
All right, Keith, that brings us to the end of our conversation. I know.
We had so much fun.
We can continue off air, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today. If our listeners want to connect with you or learn more, what's the best spot for them to find you?
LinkedIn, probably. I'm pretty active on there. I post a lot. I comment a lot. I do have a website that I tend to every now and then, but, LinkedIn is probably the best way to get in touch with me.
All right. Thank you again for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Thanks, Kristen. I appreciate it.
That's it for this episode of Expertly Said. We're produced by Every Little Word, a boutique content and communications agency. If you liked what you heard, you know what to do. Subscribe, share the episode with a colleague, or leave us a review. If you want to connect with me directly, please do. You can find me on LinkedIn. Just search Kristen Sweeney. Thanks for listening. Talk soon.